Second marker.
Action.
Have you ever heard of colonization roads?
No.
We are one of the most stable regimes in history. There are very few countries that can say for nearly 150 years they've had the same political system without any social breakdown, political upheaval, or invasion. We are unique in that regard. We also have no history of colonialism.
I don't know if Stephen Harper thinks that there's no history of colonization. I think that he thinks that colonization was benign, was benevolent, right? So we didn't have this awful, violent, bloody colonization, right? We had this peaceful colonization where very nice European settlers came and made agreements with very nice but, savage native peoples, and we helped them out through Christianity and religion, and we taught them how to farm, and we pay for their school. So that has been colonization, and it's been a very benevolent one.
Canadians at the highest level do not understand the history between First Nations and the Canadian government when its own prime minister says something like that, right?
I thought he was joking. I thought
no.
So this is a bit of I guess a bit of a game. I'm gonna say a few quotes, and we'll see if we can name who said it. Who said this country has no history of colonialism?
What was the last guy's name?
Do you know who said that quote?
No, I don't. No. Not Bush. That's so bad.
It wasn't President Bush.
No. Is it Trump?
No, we're talking about Canadian.
Okay, Canadian.
Do we think this country has a history of colonialism?
To a certain extent.
Almost definitely.
Harper.
Mulrooney?
Harper or Mulrooney?
It's Mulrooney.
Harper.
You guys want to put $5 on it?
Yeah.
That's kind of how we were founded. Yeah.
It was Stephen Harper. You owe her $5. Is that shocking?
Yeah.
I was at the grocery store the other day. I have a single watermelon, and I'm standing in the line.
these are the cards from my new comedy special.
The conveyor belt of the groceries is full. The woman ahead of me, she's got the whole belt. I'll wait. I got it. A little bit of real estate on the belt opens up. Me as a native person, I see a little bit of real estate and I look, oh, it's not for me.
I wanted the comedy special to open up with a game show, really flashy lights, sound effects, ding, 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 ding. How colonized are you?
What's sadder than a native guy in a cowboy hat what's sadder than that, right? Like, when I see a Cree dude or a guy down in South Dakota at the rodeo and he's got his nuts in his fucking tight Levi's and he's got the big turquoise belt buckle and the hat, it's just like, fuck colonization, you win. You win. Look, you win. You win.
Colonization is not just something that happened in the past. One of the things that Patrick Wolfe says, who is a theorist of settler colonialism, is that it is a structure and not an event. It is an ongoing process, something that we reproduce every day through our actions.
You win. Look, you win. You win. You win.
Colonization. We need to talk. I know you well. I wish I didn't, but I do. How crazy is this? There is a road named after you in my hometown. The road starts at the base of our traditional ceremonial grounds on my reserve, Couchiching First Nation in northwestern Ontario. I played on this road. I swam off of it, I drove and walked this road, but I never knew what this road had done to my people. And it turns out there are colonization roads scattered across Manitoba and Ontario. Crazy. In the early 1900s, after the Métis resistance, my mom's family relocated from Fort Alexander to Couchiching. In 1914, my dad's family was forcibly relocated from one of the 7 Anishinaabe communities along the Rainy River to form Manitou Rapids First Nation. This was an illegal amalgamation by the province of Ontario because they wanted the land for settlers, and they gave them our land for free. What are we talking about when we talk about the settlement of Canada?
By order of Parliament, land grants are to be given for the purpose of settlement in Somerville Township by order of the Public Lands Act. Yeah, how many of these would be printed? Like, could be 100?
It could be quite more than that, actually.
Right.
Typically for orders like this, 1 or 2% actually draw immigrants who buy into this program. And so they have to produce quite broadly, and they're going to disseminate these all over the place, town, country, city.
Right.
What was presented to them was the best case scenario. So what you're looking at is an offer of irrigated land, lots of nearby lumber, lots of potential farmland, access to trade markets, roads, things like that. So they're not told about the winters. They're not told about the lack of access to water for 8 months of the year because everything's frozen. So those little details get left out.
Life would have been very difficult to come over here and to discover things like winter and the land being very different as well.
But the advantage of this piece of policy in 1853 is that you're actually given land on a documented surveyed road. So there is a road there, which makes things immeasurably easier than happened to be the circumstance 20 years earlier, when you're given a parcel of land literally in the middle of nowhere.
So the government decided if we create a road system, then they will give the access to the land and we would be able to have a greater population.
What can you tell me about the Act?
Well, the Act came about as a need to populate the area between the Rideau River and the Ottawa and the Lake Simcoe. And this area didn't have a very good population at this point because there was enough land. As the need for land grew and for people to move into the area, there was no way of getting about.
To me, roads, railways, they're like an infection, not just metaphorically, but actually. It was a way of invading our territories without legal authority, without consent. And what are roads used for now? They literally bleed our territories dry of people, of resources, everything that matters to us, and they pose a hazard.
I think the early settlers had a real difficult time with what they called the wilderness, which is, of course, we don't have wilderness, this is our home. When the land grants were starting to happen, they were giving away our old camps and our shorelines and our islands and the river mouths and all this. We had to move. In fact, we were being shot at. It's a history which started with conflict. So we had to move. We had to move.
It's one of the fallacies of history. We honor their names, but we don't necessarily honor the people. We've lost the people. We're honoring the act of what they did, not so much the people. So these settlers, they really were, consciously or not, the vanguard. Their names are on our streets. I mean, we revere and honor these people for their hardships.
Awesome.
So let me get this straight. In Canada's earliest days, if you were a rich and powerful white dude actively colonizing, you got a road named after you. But sometimes they just flat out named the road Colonization Road. This was Manifest Destiny, Canadian style. Oh, we are in a time that we have never seen before, and we are not ready, folks. We are not ready. Because I'm talking about nation-to-nation shit, right? Like, I'm talking about fucking land back, which I don't even know if that means you have to go back to where you came from. I'm not sure yet. Maybe it does. I don't know. Ooh, feel that. Oh, that's the assholes of...
What is distinctive about settler colonialism as opposed to other forms of colonialism is that the settlers come to stay. They make this their home on native land. And so
aren't those song lyrics?
Right. Exactly. And that shows how deeply entrenched that system is.
Crazy.
I don't know. Maybe you do have to go home. I don't know, because we've never been here before. And that's the truth. I don't know. Maybe you do. And no, that wouldn't be so fucking bad, right? Like, you left people behind. You selfish fucking people left people over there. You're like, we're gonna peace out over to the land of milk and honey over here. And y'all, good luck with the fucked up industrial revolution that didn't work. We're getting on this big boat. Peace. And those people are still looking for you.
The doctrine of discovery, which was formalized in 15th century papal decrees, that the first European nation to discover lands uninhabited by civilized peoples, by which they meant Christians, or also people who were not using the lands in efficient ways as determined by Europeans, the European nation to discover those lands would have sort of first dibs and sovereign ownership.
He shall have dominion also from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. They that dwell in the wilderness shall bow before him, and his enemies shall lick the dust.
Well, right, that's a very evocative quote. As you know, it's from the Bible, it's from the Old Testament, from Psalm 72, the Song of Solomon, and that first verse is attributed to being the source of the full legal title for Canada after Confederation in 1867, the Dominion of Canada. We may have forgotten in this secular age just how predominantly Christian, overwhelmingly Christian, Canada was.
So that is really at the root of the Canadian legal system, of the American legal system, the Australian, any of those former British colonies.
So when it came to the creation of Canada after the resolution of conflicts between the French and the English, and they wanted to work out accommodations with the First Nations, treaty-making process was the way of communicating, working out political and peaceful and trade arrangements with the First Nations in Canada.
The Royal Proclamation is an order given by King George III in October of 1763 that laid out the rules and the form of government for the newly acquired colony of New France, which the British renamed Quebec, and the other colonies they acquired as a result of the end of the 7 Years' War.
All of our rights are inherent. That means they were here before anyone else came here. And we have those rights because we were nations and we had our own laws and our own territories. And these things all belonged to us before anyone else came here. So all the Royal Proclamation did was recognize that. But if you read the Royal Proclamation, they say why they had to recognize those rights. And it was because the only way that their colony could be secure or have any justice is if they recognized and protected those rights, because we weren't giving them up.
I actually had a student ask me one day, why doesn't the government just walk away from the treaties? I mean, come on. That was the question. But these are contracts.
Yeah.
They're based in law.
Yeah.
If the government walks away from its legal obligation, and by the way, the rest of us, under contracts, it kind of validates our legal system.
Even after the Royal Proclamation, look at all of the treaties that were signed. Why? Because they had to have our consent. There was no choice, by law or by international law. And that's significant. Treaties don't take away from any of that. It actually just bolsters that. And now that the treaties are constitutionally protected, it means they are. Recognition of our sovereignty and nationhood is the basis of the legal legitimacy of this country. You take away that, and Canada has no legitimacy whatsoever. They need to recognize our sovereignty and nationhood in order to even exist as a state. And every other country in the world is well aware of that. So all Canada has to do is make one stupid move and watch how quickly Russia or the United States comes in to claim our territory.
And the lesson of our treaties is we have a deal. We have a sacred agreement, you and I, that we're supposed to live together in this place for as long as the waters run.
In fact, a lot of the treaty-making protocols and processes that Europeans adapt are indigenous practices like wampum belts. This is not a European custom.
Can you talk about the Treaty of Niagara wampum belt and sort of its place as a founding document of this country?
Well, I think that's the key. The fact that the Treaty of Niagara's wampum belt is a founding document of this country and should be recognized as such.
They understood those treaties to be nation-to-nation agreements. And so as Canada evolved into what it has become today, Native people have continued to see those treaties as nation-to-nation.
And here's the other really important and significant thing about that treaty. It's that a wampum belt was done by Indigenous hands, with Indigenous ceremony and Indigenous intentions, and there's no misinterpretation about what that belt means.
We adopted them. We brought them into family.
It is our fault.
We signed treaties with them, which made them family, not friends.
In their worldview, people were divided into one of two categories, so relatives or strangers. Okay, there wasn't an acquaintance category. So if you were going to trade with somebody, if you were going to engage in any kind of alliance relationship with somebody, they had to become relatives. And there are all kinds of ceremonies and protocols, a law, in other words, for how you brought people in, and then what rights and obligations those people had.
The whole wampum belt concept of we'll work together, we'll share this place, but I will steer my boat and you will steer yours. And never will we try to interfere with one another. I think that's the most critical fundamental message that has since been recognized by the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It's basically self-determination, recognizing, whatever English word you want to use, nationhood, sovereignty, self-determination, it's we will take care of ourselves and govern ourselves. You do your business, and we'll work along cooperatively in the areas that we have to. And what a wonderful vision for Canada. And I think that is the original vision. We don't need any new ideas to save Canada. We just need to go back to that original wampum belt and recognizing each other's abilities to govern ourselves and protect one another.
It's like, well, this is an interesting idea. Like, who wouldn't want to make things right? I think everyone in this room, we agree we would want to go back and make shit right. That's why we're here. Well, you're probably here to get drunk and everything else, but we're also like, we care about this idea, right? The time that we're in, we care. And so what would that look like? And if we had the magic wand, like maybe that would be okay, but you fucking know that if white people had the magic wand to turn it all back to being good, they'd be like, we made it good, and you'd never fucking live it down, right? It would just be like, we did it, you're welcome.
There was a colonial agenda that was behind all of that industrial activity, and there still was a power elite that existed in the eastern parts of the country, and they saw the West as their resource bank.
Kenora's a unique place in Canada. It's a crossroads. It's a crossroads between two economic transport routes.
For example, when the Canadian Pacific Railway was put through this area, they could have gone with the southerly route using the Dawson Road. That was rejected in favor of a more northerly route that would go through what became Kenora. And part of the rationale for that was to be able to exploit the rich virgin timber resources and the mineral belt that lays between Lake Superior and Kenora.
Well, within a 5-mile corridor at the north end of Lake of the Woods, you will find the entire infrastructure that ties this country together. So much can happen at an intersection. Collision is what happened here in Kenora. The greatest number of residential schools were in this area. The policies of cultural genocide that were going on all happened here. in force, and very, very quickly.
We have to examine what they're doing as a way of clearing us of the land and eliminating us as an opposition.
And as part of that process, there is an effort to eliminate the indigenous ways of life, the indigenous political and economic systems.
And we have to stop looking at ourselves as a minor wart on Canada's toe and start looking at this is ours.
And that process is carried out through laws like the Indian Act, banning ceremonies, regulating every aspect of Native people's lives, institutions like the residential school system, to kill the Indian and the child. And it's justified through ideologies of racism, ideologies that we, the colonizers, are inherently superior and entitled to do this.
But if this is the foundation of our country, what do we think of that as Canadians? What are we led to think as Canadians?
Well, we're led to think that it's the First Nations people who are the problem, and that's not it at all.
It's not a nice feeling to know that we've built a country kind of on taking over another people's what was rightfully theirs and taking from them what we don't really deserve. And
colonization road is a really powerful metaphor, and it's a really powerful physical process that was very, very deliberate and very, very strategic. They wanted the land, we were on the land, and so dispossession and then erasure became the primary way over and over and over again through policy, through informal relationship, through violence, through every mechanism possible, really.
One of the first things I noticed driving in on the bus from Thunder Bay was that you have to literally drive through Couchiching First Nation to get into town. They're literally right side by side. And then we went to the grocery store and saw Indigenous and non-Indigenous people mixing and mingling. Everybody seemed to know each other on a sort of friendly first name basis. We heard that the kids all go to the same schools. A lot of Native and white people work together, play hockey together, go fishing together, and so on. And yet, my partner was encountering almost daily racist remarks about Aboriginal people. So how do these things go together? It didn't seem to add up.
We hear it a lot over and over. Why can't you just be like us? What does that mean?
Assimilate.
Yeah.
So there is a very well-known theory in social science known as the contact hypothesis, which basically suggests that as groups interact with one another over time, their stereotypes and prejudice will break down and everything will be okay. But that didn't entirely seem to be happening here.
But we want to be who we are. We want our culture to be strong. We want them to know that the past and the present and future are actually alive. And we want respect for wanting that for ourselves.
There was a public opinion poll at the height of Idle No More as well, which suggested that Canadians were very divided over Idle No More movement, over Chief Spence's hunger strike, over Indigenous and treaty rights. There was actually an increase in some racist attitudes over time. For example, in Fort Frances, somebody rammed a truck into a protester. The same thing happened in Edmonton and elsewhere. In Thunder Bay, an Anishinaabe woman was raped, and the white men who raped her allegedly said, "You people don't deserve your rights." The current situation, I would say, is that Indigenous peoples are accepted on an individual basis, on a daily basis, as long as they don't rock the boat,
right?
As long as they know their place.
Yeah.
But if you start talking about colonization or treaty violations or land claims, what are you doing? That's
As a band member at Couchiching and being born and raised in Fort Francis, it's incredibly difficult to hear you say that, because that's I've never heard that. I've never heard anybody say that about where I come from. Yeah, but I know it. Yeah. So to hear you articulate it is very difficult.
I mean, I really do. I mean it about this reconciliation, and then the ongoing colonialism. Obviously, like, this is the foot on our throats, right? Is colonialism, and that's still going on because it's still going on. And the country was that's a weird laugh, but the country was founded on it, and. You know, it's still founded on it, and it's still happening. And there are these things called colonization roads, and we're making a movie. This is a movie. Well, this isn't a movie. That's a camera. But the film that we're making is about colonization road and all of the systems and the laws and the policies that were put in place to allow Canada to become a thing. And Canada became a thing because Native people said, okay. What, is that fucking wrong? Is that false? Because we said yes to treaty. Oh, this, I don't know. Like, there'd be no Canada if there was no us. And the underpinning of your law, I'm not being rude, your law. We're on the same team, sorta.
So I don't think we're having the right conversations in this country. We're talking about reconciliation, but we're not talking about land. We're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, but we're not talking about the land, where the root causes of every issue that Indigenous people are facing right now in Canada comes from dispossession, and it comes from erasure, and it comes from the system of settler colonialism that keeps us in an occupied state.
Racism is the basis of all Indian policy. That's the problem. We have people, like a 5,000 person Indian Affairs bureaucracy, not including Justice Canada and Fisheries and Oceans and Health Canada and everyone else, who's working from the premise that we are less, we deserve less, and we get less.
It's been 100 years since Canada stole the land. I always longed for one day that people from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and the world could listen. It's been a struggle for me to keep inspiring my grandson, because he gave up hoping that the country, the world, could ever listen to what we're going through on this side of the water intake.
Shoal Lake 40 is a classic case. It's the iconic Canadian story. And it's simple. Urban settler Canada wins, First Nation and the bush loses.
Welcome to Shoal Lake 40. We look forward to the next couple hours to share our story with you.
The situation at Shoal Lake 40 was that Winnipeg was going to be the Chicago of the North. This is the last best West. We're going to colonize the West. We're going to populate, civilize the West.
I was pregnant, and I got really sick. We called an ambulance. We couldn't get across. The ambulance was at the landing. I had a miscarriage.
They came to Shoal Lake, and they went in, and by the time they got done, they expropriated 3,500 acres of land from this community. They displaced the village area where those people are or had been for thousands of years.
Next thing I know, I can hear ice. I can hear ice cracking. Then I seen my husband going down, but it was too late for me to try and back up. And I went down. I went completely under the ice. I remember looking up, and I can actually see the ice where I came through. I can see it floating around above me. As I was looking up, I can see the stars.
In the end, they got 3,500 acres of land. They displaced the community. They built a diversion canal that cut that community off from the mainland so they no longer had access. It meant that it didn't matter which way that community turned, they were going to have, in order to get off that island, they're going to have to trespass on somebody else's land.
I do this because I had an incident when I was a young boy.
And I heard my husband, he said, over here, over here.
Chief and I are lucky to be sitting here today.
And I turned around, I went to where his voice was.
I lost my mother when I was a little boy.
And he was laying on top of the ice, and he grabbed me, and he pulled me on top of the ice, and I was trying to get up. And he told me, no, I said, don't get up. He said, we're just gonna crawl from here.
We didn't have the infrastructure or the service to help save my mother and my sister.
The Public Utilities Board for the province of Manitoba looked at it in 2012. They estimated that the sale of water, or between sewer and water, they made profit, $45 million. This is about the commodification of water. This is the biggest water bottling company going. They're making millions at it. Their security cam is up there. They probably got a security cam on the tower. That's certainly their communication system is up there.
So when you say pipe, there's a physical pipe?
It's unreinforced concrete pipe. They just blasted through the height of land and built an underground stream. So they're draining the lake.
So 100 miles to the west here that's how long the pipe is, from Shoal Lake to Winnipeg.
So this is telling us that we're trespassing here.
Well, basically, Canada took our land, the best land we had, and gave it to the city of Winnipeg City Waterworks, and through that process, they built this man-made dike here, and they stuck a no trespassing sign here, so we're unable to access different parts of our reserve.
If this Freedom Road gets built, and you mentioned the politicians don't like the name of that road, Freedom Road. But your people named it.
The people named it Freedom Road because,
yeah.
Yes, because it's going to create freedom for my people.
Yeah.
We'll have access to everything else, clean water, the rich gravel that's out here. We don't have access right now, so we can build that road. Yes, it's freedom for us.
The physical isolation of that community, and then the commodification of the water, that's what Freedom Road is all about. Freedom Road will allow the community to have a water treatment plant. It'll allow them to finally get some benefits back from the diversion of all that resource. Freedom Road is about survival, the survival of that community.
I think about what settlers and explorers first saw when they came here, is they didn't see the beauty of my nation. They didn't see how we lived with the land. They didn't see our networks of relationships. They didn't see our ceremony.
You know, the land is the basis of the Canadian economy. Indigenous peoples have been kicked off the land, dispossessed of it to make way for the Canadian economy.
Understanding Colonization Road is so important, is that what's happening here is the practice of colonization. And so that if people here, and in these resource towns like Kenora, who are out there whacking down the trees, digging the rocks out of the... But they're doing all of that for somebody else. They are the pawns of colonization.
I think that the objective is to kind of get rid of the Indian, right? And traditionally, the method has been very overt, right? We're gonna eradicate your culture, we're gonna eradicate your language, we're gonna get you off of the land, we're gonna separate you from your family and your communities.
The creation of Canada is something that's been very violent. It's been very violent consistently towards Indigenous women, and it's been very violent consistently towards the land.
We have today this a different form of trying to kill the Indian.
They didn't see the poetry in our language. They didn't see our children and our old people as being valuable. They saw resources. They saw money.
I don't see any real long-term benefit in it, because the resource economy is a boom and bust economy. It's short-term gain for long-term pain, to use an old cliche.
Yeah, they benefit, they get the good jobs in the mail, they get the, maybe they clip the royalty, but in fact, the real beneficiaries of that, the really rich people, are back at head office.
Canada has been very sneaky at the institutional and legal tools it's used to kind of push Native people out of the way.
The practice of colonization kills people.
I won a Treaty 3 Youth Award, and essentially was told by the elders and old people to go away and to continue to tell these stories, and I was given stories to tell as well. That responsibility I was aware of. I was aware of fairly young. One of the real issues is, you know, sometimes we try to out-Indian each other, and that's fucked up. That's what the Indian Act was supposed to do. It was supposed to divide us, status, non-status, Métis, 6.1, 6.2, all that bullshit. And really started coming up in a more violent way when I was older, when I'd go to the bar. And all the kids that I grew up with started drinking. And I started drinking. And we just beat the fuck out of each other. Just, you know, that's the way it was.
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Just wanna...
Want to look around?
Yeah.
So it'll be 420.
Nobody granted us anything. All of our rights are inherent.
And the lesson of our treaties is we have a deal.
We want them to know that the past and the present and future are actually alive.
That's the kind of education that I think needs to happen. and is happening, but it needs to happen on a much wider scale.
They used to give out medals to the chiefs for administering the Indian Act. Now they give out really delicious hotel dinners.
They didn't see the beauty of my nation. They didn't see how we lived with the land. They didn't see our networks of relationships. They didn't see our ceremony.
This poster is essentially the movie right here. It's the original colonization road, where the use of the steamboats, the waterways that we shared to bring people west, and it was the building of the railroad. It's a colonization road. This right here is this is the movie. We need to jack this poster. This is the movie poster.
I think the relationship's the problem. What's happened to us? First of all, we're desperate people. And I know because my father, went to residential school and he was desperate for exoneration. He thought what happened to him was his fault. And I know that because when Harper apologized, at 88 years old, this man said, well, at least I know it's not my fault. He needed white people to tell him. Now, I didn't go to residential school, so I don't know why that's a need. But I do know it's a definite need. We need to be exonerated from blaming ourselves when we were in those institutions, that we must have done something wrong, and that our parents did something wrong in sending us there. The second hornswaggling that we're getting is that reconciliation is us forgiving them. Well, I would forgive anybody for standing on my feet if they fucking got off. Do you know what I mean? And stop doing it. But it doesn't end. They agreed that they separated us from our teachings. They agreed that they separated us from our language, and thus the language was pretty much destroyed in ourselves. They agreed that they separated us from our culture, and so we're culturally fractured and destitute. But nobody's going to help us bring it back together. And it's about establishing education in the culture, in the language. No, it's not. They're not going to do that. They're educating us in their schools, in their culture, and in their language. It's still going on. They're still squarely on our feet. But we're so desperate to be accepted that we'll accept their apology without change.
It's hard to see how reconciliation can really take place if you haven't addressed those underlying issues.
And maybe it's the case that we're never going to come to any, mutually agreeable solution where we kind of honor peace, friendship, and respect. Maybe we're always going to be in contention. Maybe that's always how it's going to be.
Whatever we've lost, we'll pick it up. We'll retrace, And there's different ways of doing this through like dreaming and meditation and listening and storytelling amongst each other and so on, that we will pick up the pieces. It's strong. It is strong. It cannot, because it's life. It promotes life. We cannot continue to ignore that, because that is what it is. It has a force of its own. And we're the instrument. That's what we are. It will happen.
I grew up not knowing about or questioning you. Many of us embraced you without even knowing it. You and your roads and your systems have divided our people. Colonization, you're an infection, a poison, something we must dismantle in order to move forward. Colonization, you don't win, you lose. Indigenous peoples and Canadians, we can live the two-row wampum, each in our own canoe. We will honor the treaties in their full original spirit and intent. We will affirm our place in our traditional territories with the return of our lands. We will speak our languages. We will share our stories. We will respect the land, the water, and the air that we all share. We will find strength in our communities again. We can even change the names of these roads. Because in spite of everything we've gone through as a peoples, through the strength and the love of our elders and our ancestors, we are still alive. We are still fighting. We are still here. The era of reconciliation. Let's be friends. After all, this is Canada, our home on native land. I don't know why I stared at you. You seem nice. That was not a threat. That was aggressive, but it was not like it's your fault. And I'm sorry. Sometimes don't be sorry. It's not, you didn't do anything. You're alive. So don't not be alive. Like, stay alive. Just don't be a Sir John A. Macdonald.